I
They
told you what
laughed the
happened.
moment
With a
they saw
grocery
it.
bag.
A crumpled
I
plastic
find that
grocery
hard to
bag
believe.
nodded twice at the top, resting in my lap like it didn't belong in a room
Seriously,
full of polished
Mother?
wood
In
and
here?
expensive
It
opinions.
holds my things. What does it
Ashley
matter?
smirked first. Then Michael
It's
joined in, shaking
embarrassing.
his head like I had finally proven what they'd been whispering about
He didn't
for
want
months.
anyone else to
that I
know
was
where this
slipping.
came from.
Mom, you're really bringing trash to a family meeting now. I didn't answer. I just tightened my grip on the bag. Because inside that trash was the one thing standing between me and losing everything I had left. And for the first time in my life, I realized my own family wasn't just ashamed of me. They were afraid of what I knew. If this story speaks to you, take a second to like and subscribe. It truly helps more than you know. And I'd really love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today, and what time is it there? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. I used to believe that silence in a house meant peace. Now I understand it can also mean something else entirely. It had been 8 years since my husband Richard passed away. 8 quiet, careful years of learning how to live alone in the same house we had built together. Every corner still carried him, his tools neatly arranged in the garage, his favorite chair by the window, the dent in the kitchen counter where he once dropped a hammer and laughed it off like it was nothing. I never moved anything. People told me I should, that it would help me move on. But they didn't understand. This house wasn't holding me back. It was holding me together. And for most of those 8 years, my son Michael barely came around. He was busy, he said. Business deals, networking, travel. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. That's what mothers do. We make excuses for the ones we love. But about 6 months ago, everything changed. Michael started visiting more often. At first it felt nice. Unexpected, but nice. He would bring Ashley and Ethan along, and they'd sit at my dining table like we used to when he was younger. For a little while, it almost felt like family again. But then I started noticing the details. Ashley would walk through my house like she was inspecting it, not admiring, evaluating. Her eyes lingered on the walls, the floors, the windows. She asked questions that didn't sound like conversation. How old is the roof? When was the last time you updated the plumbing? Do you ever feel safe here by yourself? At first, I answered politely. I thought she was just making small talk, but then the tone shifted. Well, she said one afternoon, brushing invisible dust off my kitchen counter, this place is charming. But it's a lot for one person, Leslie. I remember the way she said my name. Not Mom, not even kindly, just distant. Michael chimed in quickly like they had rehearsed it. She's right, Mom. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone anymore. I smiled the way I always did when I didn't want to start a conflict. I've been dealing with it just fine for 42 years. Ashley let out a soft laugh, not loud, not rude enough to call out, but sharp enough to cut. Times change. That was the first moment something inside me tightened. Not fear, not yet, just awareness. From then on, their visits became more frequent and more purposeful. They stopped sitting and talking as much. Instead, they walked. Through the house, through the yard, whispering to each other when they thought I couldn't hear. One afternoon, I stood in the hallway and listened. The layout's good, Ashley murmured. Yeah, Michael replied. And the neighborhood's hot right now. We could flip this fast. I felt my stomach drop. Flip. Not renovate. Not help. Flip. I stepped into the doorway before I could stop myself. Flip what? They both turned too quickly. Ashley smiled first. That polished, practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Oh, Leslie, we were just talking about possibilities. Possibilities for what Michael stepped in his tone softer, almost comforting. For you, Mom. For your future. My future. It sounded like something you say when you're talking about someone who doesn't have much time left. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. There was a pause. A small one, but long enough for me to notice. Then Michael sighed. "We just think it might be time to start thinking about something safer." "There's nothing unsafe about my home." Ashley crossed her arms. "It's not about the house. It's about you being alone in it." That word again. Alone. They said it like it was a problem that needed solving. But I had never felt unsafe here. Not until they started coming around. The next week, Michael brought brochures. He laid them out on my kitchen table like they were gifts. Bright, glossy pamphlets with smiling seniors and perfectly trimmed lawns. Assisted living communities, he said. "Just look at them, Mom. You'd have people around. Activities. Support. Support." Another word that sounded kind until you looked closer. I picked one up, flipping through the pages slowly. Swimming pools, group dinners, shuttle buses, and no privacy, no history, no Richard. "I'm not interested," I said, setting it back down. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. "Just for a second. You haven't even considered it. I don't need to." Ashley leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Leslie, this isn't about what you need. It's about what's best." I looked at her then, really looked at her, at the way she spoke over me, at the way she spoke for me, and for the first time, I wondered, when had I stopped being the one in charge of my own life? "I think I'm still capable of deciding what's best for myself," I said quietly. Silence filled the room. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing between us. He hadn't said much during any of these conversations, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't like this. That gave me a small, fragile sense of comfort. At least someone still saw me. Michael rubbed his forehead. "We're just trying to help Mom." I nodded slowly. "I know." But deep down, something didn't feel like help. It felt like pressure, carefully disguised, perfectly timed, and slowly tightening. That night, after they left, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at the brochures they had forgotten to take with them. I didn't throw them away. I didn't move them. I just sat there thinking about the way Ashley had walked through my house, about the way Michael had talked about my future, about that one word I couldn't get out of my head, flip. I had spent decades building a life in this home, and suddenly, the people I trusted most were looking at it like an opportunity. Not a memory, not a legacy, an opportunity. That was the moment the unease settled into something heavier. Not quite fear, but close enough to recognize. Because for the first time, I started to wonder if my son wasn't visiting me more often because he missed me, but because he needed something from me. And I hadn't figured out what it was yet. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it wasn't going to end well. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part I keep going back to, the slow, careful way everything shifted, like furniture being moved 1 inch at a time, until suddenly you're standing in a room you don't recognize anymore. A week after the brochures appeared, Michael came back alone. That in itself was unusual. Ashley rarely let him do anything alone when it came to family matters. So when I saw his car pull into the driveway without hers, something in me straightened. I opened the door before he could knock. "Hi, Mom," he said, offering a small smile. It looked practiced. "Careful." "Michael?" I replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Where's Ashley?" "She had a meeting," he said quickly. "I just thought maybe we could talk. Just the two of us." That should have made me feel hopeful. But instead, it made me cautious. We sat in the living room, the same place where he used to sprawl across the carpet with toy cars when he was 5 years old. Back then, his biggest concern was whether the blue one was faster than the red. Now he sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together like he was about to negotiate something. "I've been thinking about what we talked about," he began. "I figured you had," I said. He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Mom, I don't think you realize how much has changed." There it was again, that tone, not concerned corrective. "I'm aware enough," I reply. "D." He shook his head gently. "No, I mean, Mom, I don't think you realize how much has changed." There it was again, that tone, not concerned corrective. "I'm aware enough," I replied. He shook his head gently. "No, I mean things like finances, property taxes, maintenance costs. It's not like it used to be." I folded my hands in my lap. "I've been managing it just fine. For now," he said quickly. "For now." It was such a small phrase, but it landed like a weight. "And later?" I asked. He exhaled slowly like he had been waiting for me to ask that. "That's what I'm worried about." "What happens later, Mom? What happens if something goes wrong and you can't handle it?" "I'll figure it out," I said. He gave a small, almost sympathetic smile. "That's the thing. You shouldn't have to." I stared at him for a long moment. "You keep saying that," I said quietly, like I'm incapable of living my own life. "That's not what I'm saying," he replied quickly. "I'm just saying, maybe it's time to let someone help you manage things." Manage. Another word that sounded harmless until you looked at how it was being used. And who would that someone be, I asked. He didn't hesitate this time. "Me." The word hung in the air between us. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. "You want to manage my life?" I asked. "I want to help you," he corrected. "We can set things up so I handle the financial side. Bills, accounts, paperwork, just to make sure everything stays organized. Everything is organized." "I know, but..." "But what?" He stopped. For a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not concern, not love. Something closer to impatience. "Mom," he said, his voice tightening slightly. "This isn't a debate. I'm trying to do the responsible thing here. Responsible. As if I had been irresponsible. As your son," he continued, "it's my job to make sure you're taken care of." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "When did I stop taking care of myself?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Silence filled the room. And in that silence, I realized something that made my stomach turn. This wasn't a conversation. It was a step, one of many. Carefully planned, carefully timed, and I was already behind. Michael reached into his folder and pulled out a document. "I brought something," he said, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "It's just..." And I was already behind. Michael reached into his folder and pulled out a document. "I brought something," he said, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "It's just a standard authorization form," he said. "Nothing complicated. It would let me help you manage things if you ever needed it." I looked at the paper. Even from where I was sitting, I could see the words. Power of attorney. My chest tightened. And why, I asked slowly, would I need that right now? "You might not," he said quickly, "but it's better to have it in place. Just in case. Just in case." Another harmless phrase. Another piece of pressure. I'm not signing anything today, I said. His expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. A small flicker of frustration. Mom, you're being stubborn, and you're being pushy. That surprised him. I could see it, maybe because I had never said something like that to him before. Look, he said, rubbing his temples. I'm just trying to avoid problems down the line. And I'm trying to understand why you're so eager to take control of my life right now. I'm not taking control, he insisted. Then what would you call it? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps across the room. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he muttered. What? That you wouldn't see reason. Reason. As if my hesitation was irrational. As if my instincts were something to be corrected. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Michael, I said quietly. When your father was alive, we handled everything together. Every bill, every account, every decision. He stopped pacing. And after he passed, I continued. I learned to handle it on my own. I met his eyes. I didn't need help then. His jaw tightened. That was different, how he didn't answer immediately. And in that pause, I saw it. Not concern, not fear for me. Something else entirely. Something calculated. You were younger then, he said finally. Younger. The word felt heavier than it should have. And now I asked. He looked at me carefully, like he was choosing his words. Now things are different. There it was again. Different. Everything was different, except one thing. My instincts. And they were telling me something I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about protecting me. This was about something else. Something they hadn't said out loud yet. Michael picked up the document again and held it out toward me. Just think about it, he said. You don't have to decide today. I didn't take it. I won't be signing it, I said. This time, there was no softness in my voice, no hesitation, just certainty. He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly lowered the paper. Okay, he said. But the way he said it wasn't acceptance. It was calculation. Like he was already thinking about the next step, the next move. And as he walked out of my house that afternoon, I stood in the doorway watching him leave. Not with sadness, not even with anger, but with a growing, undeniable realization. Whatever Michael and Ashley were planning, they weren't going to stop just because I said no. And for the first time, I started to understand just how far they might be willing to go. The next time Ashley came over, she didn't bring wine. She brought a folder. That was the first thing I noticed as I opened the door. How tightly she held it against her chest, like it mattered more than the usual polite gestures she used to perform. No smile this time. No small talk about the weather. Just purpose. Hi, Leslie, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Michael followed behind her quieter than usual. I closed the door slowly, watching them both. Something had shifted again, and this time it felt sharper. We moved into the kitchen, but no one sat down. Ashley remained standing, placing the folder neatly on the table, as if she were setting the stage. I thought we could go over a few things today, she said. Things I asked. Just paperwork. Nothing complicated. There it was again. Nothing complicated. I had started to notice how often they used that phrase, usually right before something very complicated. I didn't realize there was paperwork to go over, I said. Ashley gave a small, controlled smile. That's because we've been trying not to overwhelm you. The words were polite, The tone wasn't. Michael avoided my eyes, drifting toward the window like he suddenly found the backyard fascinating. That told me everything I needed to know. Ashley opened the folder. Inside were neatly organized documents clipped and labeled. Too organized. Too prepared. These are just some updates we think would make things easier for you. She continued, sliding the first paper toward me. I didn't touch it right away. What kind of updates? Financial, she said. House-related, basic administrative things. I glanced down at the paper. Bank information, account summaries, but something about them felt off. These aren't my usual statements, I said. Ashley didn't miss a beat. We requested updated copies. The formatting is different, that's all. Requested, without telling me. Why would you request my bank statements? I asked. Michael turned slightly, his voice softer. Mom, we talked about this, just trying to help keep things organized. I looked at him, then back at the papers, then at Ashley. And you needed to request them directly, I asked. Ashley folded her hands calmly. It's standard when you're helping manage someone's finances. Helping manage. There it was again. I picked up the paper this time. The numbers looked familiar, but not entirely. There were transactions I didn't recognize, small ones, easy to overlook, but they were there. Where did these come from? I asked, tapping one of the entries. Ashley leaned in slightly. Oh, those are just routine expenses. For what? Maintenance, small services, things like that? That I didn't approve. Michael stepped in quickly. They're minor, Mom. You probably just forgot. Forgot? The word hit harder than I expected, because that was the line they were starting to build. Not around the house, around me. You think I forgot spending money from my own account? I asked. No, he said quickly. Not like that. Just it happens. You know things slip. I stared at him, and for a moment, I didn't see my son. I saw someone else, someone trying to convince me that my own memory couldn't be trusted. I remember my money, I said quietly. Ashley straightened slightly. Leslie, no one is saying you don't. We're just trying to make sure everything is accounted for. By changing the statements, we didn't change anything. I held up the paper. This isn't what I usually receive. Ashley's smile thinned just slightly. Like I said, it's just a different format. I set the paper down carefully, too carefully, because I could feel something building inside me. Not panic, not yet, but something close. Where are my original statements? I asked. A pause, a small one, but it was there. I'm sure they're around somewhere, Ashley said. Around somewhere. In my house. Among my things, but not where I had left them. I keep them in a drawer in the study, I said slowly. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Mom, I checked that drawer yesterday, I continued. They weren't there. Silence, this time heavier. Ashley closed the folder halfway as if trying to regain control of the moment. Well, maybe they were misplaced, she said. You know how paperwork can get... No. I knew exactly how paperwork worked, because I had spent 30 years handling it, filing it, organizing it, protecting it, and I knew when something had been moved. Or worse, removed. I don't misplace things like that, I said. Ashley's eyes hardened for just a fraction of a second. Then she softened her expression again. Of course, she said. I didn't mean to imply, yes, you did. The words came out before I could stop them. Sharp, clear, final. Michael turned toward me fully now. Mom, let's not turn this into something it isn't. Then tell me what it is, I said. He hesitated. Just long enough. Ashley stepped in. It's a transition, she said smoothly. A necessary one. Necessary for who? For you, she replied. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. It doesn't feel like that. Ashley's smile disappeared completely now, and for the first time, I saw something real underneath it. Impatience. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said. Michael exhaled sharply. Look, Mom, we're trying to help you avoid bigger problems down the line. By taking my documents, we didn't take anything. Then where are they? No answer, just silence. And in that silence, everything became clearer. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to know that this wasn't accidental. This wasn't helpful. This was controlled, deliberate, and already in motion. I looked at the folder again, at the neat stacks of paper, at the transactions I didn't recognize, at the absence of the documents I did, and something inside me shifted. Not fear, not anymore. Awareness, cold and steady. Leave the folder, I said. Ashley blinked. What? Leave it here. Michael frowned. Why? Because I want to look at it, I replied. We can go through it together, Ashley said quickly. I prefer to do it alone. Another pause, another calculation. Then Ashley closed the folder gently. I don't think that's necessary. I do. Michael stepped closer. Mom, you're overreacting. No, I said quietly. I'm paying attention. That stopped him, for just a moment. And in that moment, I saw it again. That flicker, that realization, that I wasn't as easy to guide as they had expected. Ashley picked up the folder slowly. We'll go through it another time, she said. No, I replied. We won't. Her eyes met mine, and this time neither of us looked away. Because we both understood something now. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a line, and I had just drawn it. They left not long after that. No smiles, no polite goodbyes, just tension hanging in the air like something unfinished. I locked the door behind them and stood there for a long time, thinking, replaying every word, every look, every missing paper. Then I turned and walked down the hallway to my study. I opened the drawer again, empty, exactly like the day before. But this time, it didn't feel like confusion. It felt like confirmation. I walked back into the kitchen slowly, sat down at the table, and stared at the space where Ashley's folder had been. That was the moment everything changed. Because for the first time, I stopped assuming I was being included in their plans and started understanding I was the target of them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house, the same sound that had comforted me for years. But now it felt different. Not peaceful, watchful, as if the walls themselves had started keeping secrets. Around 2 a.m. I got up. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to disturb anything. I moved through the hallway slowly, my hand brushing against the wall, the way I used to when I would check on Michael as a child. Back then, I was the one making sure everything was safe. Now I wasn't so sure anymore. I went into the kitchen and sat at the table the same place where Ashley had laid out her folder earlier that day. I could still picture the neat stacks of paper the way she had controlled the conversation like she owned it. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A small envelope tucked near the edge of the counter. I stood up slowly and walked toward it. It wasn't mine. I knew that immediately. No return address, no name on the front. Just a plain white envelope slightly bent. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. It had been opened, carefully, like someone had read it and then tried to put it back exactly the way it was. My heart started beating a little faster. I slid a finger inside and pulled out the paper. It was a bank notice, addressed to me, but I had never seen it before. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower. Notice of account activity. My breath caught. It listed transactions, withdrawals, transfers, small amounts, repeated over time. Not large enough to trigger alarms, but enough to matter, enough to add up. And the dates, they stretched back months, longer than I had realized. I sat down slowly, the paper still in my hands. This wasn't new. This wasn't a recent mistake. This had been happening quietly, consistently, right under my nose, and I hadn't seen it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. Because suddenly, memories started lining up in a way they hadn't before. The missing statements, the updated documents, the vague explanations, the pressure. It all fit. Too well. I opened my eyes again and looked at the envelope. If this had been sitting here half hidden on my counter, then someone had already seen it. Someone had already decided I didn't need to. And that thought chilled me more than anything else. I stood up, clutching the paper, and walked down the hall to my study again. The empty drawer waited for me like a silent accusation. I opened it slowly. Still empty, still wrong. But this time, I didn't just look at it. I stepped back and scanned the room. Every shelf, every stack of papers, every corner. Because if they had taken things from me, then maybe they hadn't taken everything. I started with the filing cabinet. The bottom drawer stuck slightly, just like it always had. Richard used to joke about it, saying it was too stubborn to be replaced. I pulled it open and began flipping through the folders. Insurance, taxes, old utility bills. Nothing unusual. But then, near the back behind a folder labeled Home Repairs, I found something. A thin stack of copies, not originals. Copies of bank statements, older ones, from months ago. I sat down on the floor right there and started going through them, carefully, line by line. And the pattern emerged almost immediately. Small withdrawals. At first, I might have missed them. $10 here, $15 there, then $20, then $50. Always spaced out, always subtle, but always there. I flipped through more pages. The amounts grew, not dramatically, but steadily, as if someone had been testing the limits, seeing how far they could go before I noticed. My hands started to shake. Not from fear, from anger, because this wasn't an accident. This was methodical, planned, calculated, and it had been happening for months, maybe longer. I leaned back against the cabinet, the papers spread around me, and for a moment, I let myself feel it. The betrayal. Not just of money, but of trust, of everything I had given, everything I had believed. I thought about Michael as a boy again, the way he used to bring me his broken toys, trusting me to fix them, the way he used to say, "Mom, you'll know what to do." And now, he was the one breaking things, quietly, carefully, hoping I wouldn't notice. I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back the emotion rising in my chest, because crying wouldn't help. Not anymore. What I needed now was clarity. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. Not because I felt calm, but because I needed control. I walked back into the kitchen and placed the new notice next to the older copies, side by side. And there it was. Proof. Not complete. Not yet. But enough to confirm what I had been feeling. They weren't helping me. They were using me. I stood there for a long time staring at those papers, and then something inside me shifted. Again. But this time, it wasn't just awareness. It was decision. Because if they were willing to do this, to take from me, to lie to me, to slowly erase my control over my own life, then I couldn't afford to wait. I couldn't afford to hope they would stop. I couldn't afford to trust them to do the right thing. Not anymore. I walked to the cabinet under the sink and reached for something simple. A plastic grocery bag. Thin, wrinkled, ordinary. I opened it and placed the papers inside, carefully, one by one. Then I tied the top into a tight knot. Not because it was secure, but because it felt intentional, like I was marking something. This wasn't just storage. This was protection. I held the bag in my hands for a moment, feeling its weight. Light. Almost nothing. And yet, it held more truth than anything Ashley had brought into my house. I set it down on the table, and for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel uncertain. I didn't even feel afraid. I felt focused, because now I knew, not everything, but enough. Enough to understand that this wasn't going to fix itself. Enough to know that I had to be careful, quiet, patient, because whatever Michael and Ashley were planning, they believed I was already one step behind. And for now, I was going to let them believe that. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the bank in person. Not the drive-thru, not online, inside. I chose a branch across town, one Michael and Ashley didn't use. I didn't want to risk running into anyone who might recognize my name, or worse, feel the need to call my son. The building smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee, just like it always had. It felt familiar. Safe in a way my own home no longer did. A young teller greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to review my account history," I said, keeping my voice steady. "In detail." She nodded and directed me to a desk, where a woman named Karen introduced herself as a customer service representative. She looked to be in her 50s, calm and attentive, the kind of person who actually listened. That mattered more than I expected. "What can I do for you today, Miss Thornton?" she asked. I placed my purse carefully on the desk, then reached inside and pulled out the folded bank notice from the night before. "I believe there are transactions on my account that I didn't authorize," I said. Karen's expression didn't change dramatically, but I saw something shift in her eyes. Concern. Real concern. "Let's take a look," she said gently. She typed in my information, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. The screen reflected faintly in her glasses as she scrolled, and then she paused. "Just for a moment, would you like me to print your full transaction history?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "All of it." From what date I hesitated. "Go back a year." She nodded without question. While the printer hummed softly behind us, I sat there with my hands folded tightly in my lap. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. Not from panic, from anticipation. Because whatever those papers showed, they were going to confirm everything. Karen returned with a thick stack of printed pages and set them in front of me. "Take your time," she said. I nodded and began flipping through them. At first, it was what I expected. Regular payments. Utilities, groceries, insurance. Then there they were, the same small withdrawals I had seen before. $10, 15, 20, spread out, consistent, but now seeing them laid out in front of me line after line, it wasn't subtle anymore. It was obvious. I kept going. The amounts grew, gradually, carefully, until they weren't small anymore. 100, 200, then transfers, larger ones. I stopped flipping pages. My hand rested on the paper, but I couldn't move it, because now I wasn't just seeing suspicion. I was seeing proof. "Do you recognize these transactions?" Karen asked softly. "No," I said. My voice sounded distant even to me. "No, I don't." She nodded slowly. "Some of these appear to be linked to authorized access." I looked up at her. "What does that mean?" "It means someone may have permission to make transactions on your behalf," she explained carefully. Permission. The word landed like a stone. "Who?" I asked. Karen hesitated. "According to this account, your son, Michael Thornton, is listed as an authorized party." Of course he was. Of course. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, because hearing it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. Was that always the case, I asked? Karen checked again. "No," she said. "This was added approximately 7 months ago." 7 months, right around the time the visit started, the concern, the questions, the shift. Was I present when that was authorized? I asked. Karen's fingers moved across the keyboard again. "There is documentation on file," she said. "A signed authorization form." My stomach tightened. "Can I see it?" She nodded. A few minutes later, she placed a copy in front of me. I didn't need to read the entire document. My eyes went straight to the signature. My name, written in ink. But something about it was wrong. It looked like mine. At first glance, it might even pass. But I had written my name thousands of times in my life. I knew its rhythm, its flow. And this was slightly off. Too careful. Too deliberate. Like someone trying to imitate something they didn't fully understand. "That's not my signature," I said quietly. Karen didn't argue. She simply nodded again. "Would you like to dispute the authorization?" she asked. I took a breath. Slow, measured. "Yes," I said. "Then we'll need to start a formal review process," she explained. "This could involve an investigation." Investigation. The word should have scared me, but instead, it gave me something I hadn't felt in days. Control. "Yes," I said again. "I want that." Karen began outlining the steps, but I only half listened, because my mind was already moving ahead. Faster now. Clearer. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't just something I felt in my gut. This was documented, recorded, traceable, and most importantly, provable. "Ms. Thornton," Karen said, gently pulling my attention back, "I would recommend that you monitor your account closely moving forward and limit access if possible." Limit access. I almost smiled at that, if possible. "I will," I said. I gathered the papers, carefully stacking them together. "Can I have copies of all of this?" "Of course," she said. As she prepared the documents, I reached into my purse again and pulled out the plastic bag. I unfolded it slowly and placed the papers inside. Karen glanced at it briefly, but said nothing. That too mattered. She didn't judge. She didn't laugh. She simply handed me the final documents. "If you need anything else, don't hesitate to come back," she said. I will, I replied. And for the first time since this all began, I meant it. I walked out of the bank with the bag in my hand, the weight of it slightly heavier now. Not physically, but in what it carried. Proof. Not just of what they had done, but of what they were willing to do. And as I stepped into the sunlight, I paused for a moment, looking down at the bag. It looked so ordinary, so insignificant. Anyone passing by would have seen nothing more than an older woman carrying groceries. But inside was the truth. And suddenly, I understood something that changed everything. Michael and Ashley thought they were in control. They thought I was confused, weak, one step behind, but they didn't know what I had. Not yet. And for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what they were doing. I was preparing. Because whatever came next, I wasn't going to face it empty-handed. I didn't confront them right away. That was the first real decision I made after leaving the bank. Every instinct in me, every hurt, every ounce of anger wanted to call Michael the moment I got home. I wanted to demand answers, to throw the papers in his face and ask him how he could do this to me. But I didn't, because something inside me had finally understood the truth. This wasn't emotional. This was strategic. And if I reacted too soon, I would lose the advantage I had just gained. So instead, I went home, set the plastic bag on the kitchen table, and made myself a cup of tea like it was any other day. My hands were steady. That surprised me, because for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up. I felt like I was thinking ahead. I sat at the table and slowly began organizing what I had. The older copies from the filing cabinet, the printed bank records, the notice from the envelope. I spread them out in front of me, aligning dates, circling transactions, drawing small lines where patterns repeated. It felt familiar, comforting even. For 30 years, I had worked as a school secretary. Paperwork had been my language. Order had been my strength. And now I was finally using that strength again, not for them, for me. As I worked, something became clearer. This wasn't random. The withdrawals followed a rhythm. At first once every few weeks, then once a week, then twice. And the amounts increased in quiet, careful steps. It was like watching someone test the boundaries of a locked door, pushing just enough to see if it would open. And when it did, they pushed harder. I leaned back in my chair, studying the timeline. 7 months. 7 months of slow, controlled access. 7 months of being watched, evaluated, and used. And I hadn't noticed. That part still hurt. Not because I felt foolish, but because I had trusted them not to do something like this. That was my mistake. Not ignorance. Trust. I gathered the papers back into a neat stack and placed them carefully inside the plastic bag again. Then I tied the knot tighter this time. Deliberate, secure, as if that small action could hold everything together. I had just set the bag down when I heard the front door open. My body stiffened instinctively. Mom Michael's voice called out. Too casual, too normal, like nothing had changed. Kitchen, I replied, keeping my tone even. He walked in a moment later, Ashley right behind him. Of course she was. They never came separately anymore. Ashley's eyes immediately scanned the room. The table, the counters, me, always assessing, always calculating. Hey, Michael said, offering that same careful smile. We were in the area and thought we'd stop by. In the area, I repeated softly. They lived 30 minutes away. Ashley stepped forward. We wanted to check in after yesterday, she said. Make sure everything's okay. I nodded. Everything's fine. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Are you sure? Yes. A pause. Short. Tense. Because they were expecting something. Resistance. Confusion. Maybe even apology. But I gave them none of that. Michael glanced at the table. "Where's the folder?" he asked. "I assume you took it with you," I said. Ashley smiled lightly. "Of course. Well, go over it again later," I nodded. "That won't be necessary." Another pause. This one longer. "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "I mean," I said calmly, "I've asked. I said calmly, I've decided I don't need help managing my finances." Ashley's smile faded slightly. "Leslie, we already talked about this." "Yes," I interrupted gently, "we did." And this time, I held her gaze. "I've thought about it more carefully, decided I don't need help managing my finances." Ashley's smile faded slightly. "Leslie, we already talked about this." "Yes," I interrupted gently, "we did." And this time, I held her gaze. "I've thought about it more carefully." Michael shifted his weight. "Mom, you're not seeing the bigger picture." "No," I said quietly. "I think I am." The room felt smaller suddenly, tighter, like the walls were listening. Ashley crossed her arms. "And what exactly is that?" she asked. "That I've been handling my own life for a long time?" The room felt smaller suddenly, tighter, like the walls were listening. Ashley crossed her arms. "And what exactly is that?" she asked. "That I've exactly is that?" she asked. "That I've been handling my own life for a long time?" I replied, "and I intend to continue doing so." Michael let out a small breath of frustration. "This isn't about independence. It's about practicality." "Is it?" I asked. "Yes, in handling my own life for a long time," I replied, "and I intend to continue doing so." Michael let out a small breath of frustration. "This isn't about independence. It's about practicality." "Is it?" I asked. "Yes." "Then why does it feel like control?" The word landed harder than I expected, even for me. Ashley's expression changed instantly, sharpened. "That's not fair," she said. "Isn't it?" Michael stepped forward. "Mom, no one is trying to control you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, the one who trusted me, the one who needed me. And then it was gone, replaced by something else, something colder. "Then explain the withdrawals," I said. Silence. Complete. Total. Michael froze. Ashley didn't move at all. It was subtle, but I saw it. That flicker of recognition, of calculation, of realization. They hadn't expected me to know. "What withdrawals?" Michael asked finally, too quickly, too carefully. I reached for the plastic bag, slowly, deliberately, and placed it on the table between us. The same bag they had laughed at, the same bag they had dismissed, now sitting there like something entirely different. I untied the knot, reached inside, and pulled out the papers. I didn't hand them over. I just laid them flat on the table, one by one. Michael's eyes moved across the pages, then stopped. Ashley leaned in slightly, her jaw tightening. "These are from the bank," I said calmly. "I had them printed this morning." No one spoke, because there was nothing to say, not yet. "These withdrawals," I continued tapping the paper lightly, "have been happening for months." Michael swallowed. There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake." Ashley straightened. "Leslie, you don't understand how these accounts are structured." "No," I said quietly. "I think I do." I picked up one of the documents, the authorization form, and held it up. "This," I said, "is not my signature." That was the moment everything shifted. Not slowly, not subtly, completely. Because now, the truth wasn't just something I felt. It was something they had to face. And for the first time since this all began, they weren't the ones in control of the conversation anymore. I was. No one spoke for several seconds. It was the kind of silence that didn't just sit in the room, it pressed down on it. Michael's eyes stayed fixed on the papers. Ashley's posture remained perfectly still, but I could see it in the slight tension of her jaw. They were recalculating, adjusting, and for the first time since this began, they didn't have the advantage. "Leslie," Ashley said, finally, her voice calm again, but different now, more controlled. "I think you're misunderstanding what you're looking at." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "I don't think I am," I replied. Michael stepped closer to the table, his tone shifting into something softer, almost pleading. "Mom, listen. These transactions, they're part of managing your accounts. We talked about this." "No," I said quietly. "You talked. I listened." "That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I said, lifting my eyes to meet his, "is money being taken from my account without my knowledge." Ashley leaned forward slightly. "No one is taking anything. These are authorized adjustments. That's not fair." "What's not fair?" I said, lifting my eyes to meet his, "is money being taken from my account without my knowledge." Ashley leaned forward slightly. "No one is taking anything. These are authorized adjustments." "Authorized by who?" She paused. Just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "By the account access you granted," she said. I picked up the authorization form again. "This?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes." I held it up. "Then explain why this isn't my signature." Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration beginning to show. "Mom's signatures can vary." "No," I said firmly. "They don't vary like this." Another said, "They don't vary like this." Another silence. This one sharper, more dangerous. Because now we were no longer circling the truth. We were standing in it. Ashley straightened her tone, cooling. "Leslie, I think what's happening here is that you're feeling overwhelmed. And instead of asking for help, you're assuming the worst. Overwhelmed." There it was. The narrative. Carefully built, carefully placed. I folded the paper and set it back on the table. "I went to the bank this morning," I said. "That changed everything." Michael's head snapped up. Ashley's eyes narrowed just slightly. "You what?" Michael asked. "I spoke to a representative. I reviewed the account history, and I saw when your access was added." Neither of them spoke. 7 months ago, I continued. Without me being present, Ashley recovered first. "That's not accurate." "It is." Michael stepped forward, his voice rising slightly. "Mom, you must have forgotten." I didn't forget. The words cut through him, sharp. Final. Because this time, I wasn't guessing. I wasn't questioning. I knew, and they knew I knew. Ashley crossed her arms again, her patience thinning. "Leslie, we're trying to avoid making this into something bigger than it is." I let out a slow breath. "It's already bigger than you think." Michael shook his head. "No, it's not. You're taking a few transactions and turning them into what? Some kind of accusation." "Yes," I said simply. That stopped him, because I didn't hesitate. I didn't soften it. I didn't back down. "I am," I continued. I'm accusing you of accessing my account without my permission, of taking money that wasn't yours, and of forging a document to justify it." The words hung in the air, heavy, irreversible. Ethan appeared in the doorway then. I hadn't even realized he was in the house. He stood there quietly, his eyes wide, taking everything in. "Dad?" he said softly. Michael didn't turn. Not right away. Michael didn't turn. Not right away. 'Cause he was still staring at me, still trying to decide what to do next. Ashley spoke first. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharper now. "You don't even understand how the AE systems work." "Then explain it to me," 'cause he was still staring at me, still trying to decide what to do next. Ashley spoke first. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice sharper now. "You don't even understand how these systems work." "Then explain it to me," I said. "I just did." "No," I replied. "You avoided it." She took a step closer. "Because there's nothing to explain." I met her gaze. "Then there's nothing to hide." That hit. I could see it. Because for a moment, she didn't respond. And in that moment, the truth became louder than anything they could say. Michael finally turned toward Ethan. "Go upstairs," he said quickly. "But now." Ethan hesitated, then slowly backed away. The silence returned. Thicker now, more dangerous. Michael turned back to me. "Mom," he said, his voice lower, more controlled. "This doesn't need to go any further." I tilted my head slightly. No, he said. "We can fix to his. We can straighten everything out." "Mom," he said, his voice lower, more controlled. "This doesn't need to go any further." I tilted my head slightly. No, he said. "We can fix this. We can straighten everything out. Fix it." The words sounded almost reasonable. Almost. "How?" I asked. "Well, review the accounts together," he said. "Well, make adjustments. Whatever needs to be done." "And the forged document?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Well, look into it, like it was a clerical error, like it hadn't come from him." I nodded slowly. "And if I don't agree to that?" I asked. Ashley answered this time. "Then you're making a mistake." There it was. Not concern, not persuasion, a warning. I felt something settle inside me. Not fear, not hesitation. Something stronger. Clarity. "I've already made one mistake," I said quietly. They both watched me, waiting. "Trusting you," I finished. The words landed harder than anything else I had said, because they weren't angry. They weren't loud. They were true. Michael looked away first. Ashley didn't. She held my gaze, her expression unreadable. "You're overreacting," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm responding." I gathered the papers, calmly placing them back into the plastic bag, tying the knot again. Slow, deliberate, final. Michael watched the movement closely, like he understood now, that the bag wasn't just holding papers, it was holding control. "Leslie," Ashley said, her voice quieter now, more measured. "You need to think carefully about what you're doing." I looked at her. "I have. And I'm done pretending this is normal." The room fell silent again. But this time it felt different, because the balance had shifted. Permanently. They hadn't expected resistance, they hadn't expected awareness, and they definitely hadn't expected proof. Michael took a slow breath. "We should go," he said. Ashley didn't argue, for once. They turned and walked toward the door. No goodbye, no closing words, just tension trailing behind them like something unfinished. I stood there listening as the door closed, as the car started, as they drove away, and only then did I sit down. The bag resting in front of me, quiet, unremarkable, but powerful. Because everything had changed now. There was no going back to polite conversations, no pretending, no illusions, only truth and consequences. And as I sat there, one thought settled firmly in my mind. They had tried to take control of my life, but now they were the ones losing it. They didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. At first, the silence felt like relief. The house settled again. The tension that had lingered in every room slowly loosened, like something heavy had finally been set down. But by the third day, the silence felt different, intentional, calculated. I sat at the kitchen table, the plastic bag resting in front of me untouched since the confrontation. I had replayed everything in my mind, more times than I could count, every word, every expression, every moment, when the truth had finally surfaced. And yet, something about their reaction didn't sit right. They hadn't denied it strongly enough. They hadn't fought hard enough. They had stepped back. And that, more than anything, made me uneasy. Because people like Ashley didn't retreat without a plan. Around mid-morning, the phone rang. I stared at it for a moment before answering. "Hello, Miss Thornton." The voice was unfamiliar, professional, measured. "Yes, this is Leslie Thornton. This is Daniel Reeves calling from Adult Protective Services." The words didn't register at first. "I'm sorry, from where?" "Adult Protective Services," he repeated gently. "We've received a report expressing concern about your well-being and financial management." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Concern. Financial management." "Of course. I see," I said slowly. "We'd like to schedule a visit," he continued, "just to ensure everything is okay." I let out a quiet breath. Not panic, not shock, recognition. They hadn't stepped back. They had escalated. "When would that be?" I asked. "This afternoon, if possible." "Of course. All right," I said. "I'll be here." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, the phone still in there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. It was almost impressive, the timing, the strategy. When direct control didn't work, they found another way. Paint me as incapable, unstable, in need of oversight. And suddenly, everything they had been saying, every concern I had, it was almost impressive. The timing, the strategy. When direct control didn't work, they found another way. Paint me as incapable, unstable, in need of oversight. And suddenly, everything they had been saying, every concern, every just in case, made sense in a way it hadn't before. They weren't just preparing me. They were preparing a case. I stood up slowly and walked to the window looking out at the quiet street. For years, this house had been a place of certainty, of stability. Now it felt like a stage, and I was no longer just living in it. I was being evaluated in it. The knock came at exactly 2:15 p.m. Two people stood on the porch, a man and a woman, both dressed neatly, both carrying folders. Professional, polite, observant. "Ms. Thornton?" the man asked. "Yes, I'm Daniel Reeves. This is my colleague, Sarah Klein. We spoke earlier." I nodded and stepped aside. Please come in. They entered slowly, their eyes taking in everything. The furniture, the walls, the small details that most people wouldn't notice. But they would, because that was their job. Thank you for seeing us on short notice, Sarah said. Of course, I replied. We sat in the living room. They took out their folders. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Calm, composed, because I understood something now. This wasn't just a visit, it was an assessment. Ms. Thornton, Daniel began. We received a report expressing concern that you may be having difficulty managing your finances and daily responsibilities. I nodded slightly. And who made that report, I asked. He hesitated. I'm not at liberty to disclose that. Of course not. That is fine, I said. I can guess. A brief glance passed between him and Sarah. Noted, filed away. And how would you describe your current situation? Sarah asked. I took a breath. Measured. I live independently. I manage my own home, my finances, and my daily responsibilities without assistance. They both nodded, writing something down. And have you recently received help from family members? Daniel asked. Yes, I said. Another note, can you describe that help? I paused, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew how carefully I needed to say it. They've expressed concern, I said, offered to assist with financial management. And how do you feel about that? I declined. Why? Because they're stealing from me, because they forged my signature, because they're trying to take control of my life. All of that sat right there ready to be spoken. But I didn't say it. Not yet. Because I am capable of managing my own affairs, I replied. Daniel studied me for a moment. And have there been any disputes related to finances? Yes, I said. Can you elaborate? This was the moment, the line, the decision. I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, and picked up the plastic bag. When I returned, I placed it gently on the coffee table in front of them. They both looked at it, curious, slightly puzzled. This, I said, is why we're having this conversation. I untied the knot, carefully, deliberately, and took out the papers. I handed them the bank records first, then the authorization form, then the notice. They read in silence, their expressions shifting gradually, from neutral to focused to concerned, real concern. This shows unauthorized transactions. Then the notice. They read in silence, their expressions shifting gradually, from neutral to focused to concerned, real concern. This shows unauthorized transactions, Daniel said quietly. Yes, and you're saying you did not approve these, I did not. Sarah picked up the authorization form. Is this your signature? No. Another silence, but this one was different, heavier, more serious, because now the narrative had changed, completely. This is significant, Daniel said. Yes, I replied. And your son is listed as the authorized party. Yes. They exchanged another look. This one longer, more deliberate. Ms. Thornton. Sarah said carefully, have you reported this to the bank? Yes. And they are investigating, yes. She nodded slowly. Thank you for showing us this. I sat back down, my hands resting calmly in my lap. Because now, I wasn't the one being evaluated. They were. Not directly, but through the evidence, through the truth, through the quiet, undeniable reality sitting in a simple plastic bag. Daniel closed in a simple plastic bag. Daniel closed the folder slowly. We'll need to follow up on this, he said. I understand, and we may need to speak with your family members. I expect you will. Another pause. Then the folder slowly. We'll need to follow up on this, he said. I understand, and we may need to speak with your family members. I expect you will. Another pause. Then Miss Thornton. He said, his tone softer now. Based on what we've seen so far, you appear to be managing quite well. I held his gaze. I am, and for the first time since the phone call that morning, I felt something shift again. Not just control, not just clarity, validation. Because the story they had tried to build about me was starting to fall apart, right in front of them. The call came 2 days later. I recognized the number immediately. The bank. I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to feel ready. Hello, this is Leslie Thornton. Ms. Thornton, this is Karen from the bank. We spoke earlier this week. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something more serious. Yes, Karen, I said. I remember. I wanted to follow up with you regarding the review you requested. I stood still in the middle of the kitchen, my hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. I'm listening. There was a brief pause. The kind that tells you what's coming isn't small. We've completed an initial investigation into your account activity, she said, and we've identified several irregularities. Irregularities, a careful word, but not a gentle one. What kind of irregularities, I asked. Multiple unauthorized withdrawals and transfers consistent with what you reported, she replied, as well as a discrepancy in the authorization document on file. My grip tightened slightly on the chair. The signature, I asked. Yes, she said. Our internal review confirms that the signature does not match your verified signature records. I closed my eyes for just a moment, not because I was surprised, but because hearing it confirmed made it final. Thank you, I said quietly. There's more, Karen continued. Of course there was. We've also traced the destination of several transfers, she said. They were directed to an account under the name Ashley Collins. I didn't move, didn't speak, because for a moment everything inside me went very still. Not shocked, not confused, just still. Ashley, not Michael, not both of them. Ashley, are you still there? Ms. Thornton, Karen asked gently. Yes, I said. I am here. We flagged the account and initiated a formal fraud investigation. You may be contacted by our legal department. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I understand. And Ms. Thornton, she added, her tone softening slightly. I want to say you did the right thing coming in when you did. That landed somewhere deeper than I expected. Because for days I had been operating on instinct, on quiet certainty, on the feeling that something wasn't right. And now, someone else was saying it too, out loud, officially. I appreciate that, I said. After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, the afternoon light stretching across the floor, the house as still as it had ever been. Ashley. The name echoed in my mind. Not Michael, not directly, and that realization shifted something again. Because suddenly the picture wasn't as simple as I had thought. Yes, Michael had access. Yes, his name was on the account. But the money was going to her. I walked slowly to the table and sat down the plastic bag, still resting in its usual place. I untied it once more and took out the papers. Spread them out, looked at them again. This time with a different lens, a different question. Not just what happened, but why? The withdrawals, the gradual increase, The careful spacing, that wasn't impulsive, that wasn't emotional, that was controlled, planned. And suddenly, Ashley's voice from earlier echoed in my mind. This is a transition. Not help, not concern, a transition. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider something I hadn't fully faced yet. Michael might not have started this, but he had allowed it, enabled it, looked away while it happened. And that realization hurt more than anything else, because betrayal from a stranger is one thing, but betrayal from someone who should have protected you, that's something else entirely. The knock on the door came just as I was folding the papers back into the bag. Sharp. Unexpected. I froze for a moment, then stood up and walked toward the door. Slowly, carefully. When I opened it, Michael stood there alone. No Ashley, no polite smile, no careful posture, just him. And something in his face I hadn't seen in days. Uncertainty. "Mom," he said quietly. I didn't move aside right away. "What do you want, Michael?" He hesitated. "I need to talk to you." I studied him for a moment, then stepped back. "Come in." He walked inside slowly, like he wasn't entirely sure he belonged there anymore, which in a way he didn't. We moved into the living room. He didn't sit, neither did I. "Is she here?" he asked, glancing around. "No," he nodded. "Good." That was the first honest thing he had said in a while. "What's going on?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. I got a call from the bank," he said. Of course he had. "They're investigating," he continued. "They're saying things about the account, about transactions." I said nothing, because I wanted to hear what he would say next, without being guided, without being interrupted. "They mentioned Ashley," he added. There it was. And I asked. He stopped pacing, looked at me. I didn't know he said. The words hung in the air. Simple, direct, but not enough. "You didn't know what I asked." "That she was transferring money?" he said quickly. "I knew she was helping organize things, but I didn't know she was doing that. Helping organize." Even now he was softening it, reframing it. "I trusted her," he added. I let out a quiet breath. So did I. That landed harder than anything else, because it wasn't accusation. It was truth. He looked down at the floor. "I thought we were just trying to make things easier for you," he said. "No," I replied. "You were trying to make things easier for yourselves." He flinched slightly, because he knew, even if he didn't want to admit it. "I didn't think she would go that far," he said. I shook my head slowly. "You didn't think at all," I said. Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. He looked up at me again. "What happens now?" he asked, and for the first time, there was no certainty in his voice, no control, just fear, real fear. I looked at him for a long moment, then at the plastic bag on the table, then back at him. Now I said quietly, "Now the truth finishes what it started." Michael didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me like he was trying to understand who I had become. Or maybe who I had always been. The truth he repeated quietly. "Yes," I said. He exhaled slowly and sat down finally, like the weight of everything had caught up with him all at once. I don't know what that means anymore, he admitted. I studied him for a moment, because for the first time since this started, he didn't sound defensive. He sounded lost. It means, I said carefully, that this isn't something we can fix with another conversation or another explanation. He nodded faintly, staring at his hands. I talked to Ashley, he said after a moment. That caught my attention. And his jaw tightened. She said it was temporary, that she was just moving money around, consolidating things, that she was going to tell me once everything was organized. I didn't respond immediately because I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Even now, part of him wanted to believe her. Did she? I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. She said you wouldn't understand, he added quietly. I let out a small breath. Of course she did. He looked up at me. She said you'd panic, that you'd think something was wrong when it wasn't. I met his gaze. Something was wrong. Another silence, longer this time, more honest. I didn't want to believe it, he said. I know. I replied, because I did. That was the hardest part. Michael hadn't woken up one day and decided to betray me. He had let himself be convinced, step by step, word by word, until what was wrong started to feel normal. She said you were forgetting things, he continued, that you needed help. I nodded slowly. And you believed her? He looked down again. I thought I was doing the right thing. There it was. Not greed, not cruelty, just weakness. The kind that lets someone else take control while you convince yourself it's for the best. And when did that stop? I asked. He hesitated. Yesterday, he said finally. When the bank called. I nodded. Because of course it had. Not when I confronted him. Not when I showed him the papers. But when someone else, someone official, said it out loud. I should have listened to you, he added. Yes, I said simply. The honesty of it seemed to hit him harder than anger would have. I didn't think she'd go this far, he said again, quieter this time. And now I asked. He looked up at me. I don't know who she is anymore. That too landed deeply, because it mirrored something I had been feeling myself. Not just about Ashley, about him. For a long time, I had been trying to understand how my son could become someone I didn't recognize. And now, he was asking the same question, just from the other side. Where is she? I asked. At home, he said. She doesn't know I'm here. Of course she didn't, because if she had, this conversation wouldn't be happening. What is she saying now? I asked. He let out a bitter laugh. She says it's all going to blow over, that you won't follow through, that you'll calm down and we'll all move on. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not exactly, something sharper. She still thinks this is about emotion, I said. Michael nodded. She doesn't think you'll push it further. I looked at the plastic bag on the table, then back at him. She's wrong. Another silence. But this one wasn't tense. It was settled, like something had finally found its place. What are you going to do? He asked. I took a slow breath. Exactly what I've already started. The investigation? Yes. He swallowed, and if it goes further, I held his gaze. It will. That answer seemed to shake him more than anything else, because now there was no uncertainty left, no room for interpretation, just direction. Forward, I don't want her to get in trouble, he said. I nodded slowly. I understand that. But he started. But actions have consequences. I finished. He closed his eyes briefly. I should have stopped her. Yes, I should have asked questions. Yes, I should have. You should have trusted me, I said. He opened his eyes again, and this time there was no argument, no hesitation, just acceptance. Yes, he said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Because there was nothing left to explain, only things to face. I don't know how to fix this, he said finally. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't see just betrayal. I saw something else too. Regret. Real regret. You don't fix it, I said. You face it. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand what that meant. And you let the truth do what it needs to do. He exhaled. That sounds final. It is. Another long pause. Then, are you going to tell Ethan? He asked. I considered that, because Ethan had seen more than we realized. He had been there, watching, listening, learning. Yes, I said, but not like this. Michael nodded. He deserves to understand, I added, not just what happened, but why it matters. He looked down again. I don't want him to think this is normal. Then show him that it's not, I said. That seemed to hit him, because for the first time his focus shifted, not to himself, not to Ashley, but to his son. I will, he said quietly. I stood up slowly, walking toward the table. The plastic bag sat there unchanged. Simple, ordinary, but now carrying something even more than before. Not just evidence, meaning. I picked it up and held it for a moment, then looked back at Michael. This, I said, lifting it slightly, is what saved me. He frowned slightly. The bag, no, I said. The truth inside it. He nodded slowly, and in that moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about what they had done to me. It was about what I had refused to let them take. My voice, my clarity, my control. I'm not weak, Michael, I said quietly. I never was. He met my eyes, I know that now, and for the first time since this began, I believed him. 3 days later, everything moved faster than I expected. Faster than Michael expected. Faster than Ashley could control. The call came in the morning, just after 9 a.m. Ms. Thornton, the voice said, this is Detective Laura Bennett. I'm following up on a financial fraud case connected to your account. I closed my eyes briefly. This was it. The point where things stopped being private and became official. Yes, I said. I've been expecting your call. She didn't waste time. We've received documentation from your bank regarding unauthorized transactions and a disputed authorization form. We'd like to meet with you in person. Today I asked, if possible. All right, I said. Come by this afternoon. After I hung up, I stood there in the kitchen again, my hand resting on the counter. It was strange. A week ago, this house had felt like it was closing in on me. Now, it felt like a place where the truth was being uncovered. One layer at a time. I went to the table and picked up the plastic bag. I untied it, looked at the papers again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remind myself this wasn't confusion. This wasn't imagination. This was real. And I had proof. At 1:30 p.m., there was a knock on the door. Detective Bennett stood outside along with another officer. She was in her early 40s, composed, direct, with the kind of presence that didn't need to be loud to be authoritative. "Ms. Thornton." "Yes." "I'm Detective Bennett. This is Officer Grant." I stepped aside. "Please come in." We sat in the living room, the same place where everything had started to unravel. The same place where Michael and Ashley had stood trying to convince me I didn't understand my own life. Detective Bennett opened a folder. "Ms. Thornton, we've reviewed the materials provided by your bank. I'd like you to walk me through everything in your own words." So I did. I told her about the missing documents, the pressure, the authorization form, the withdrawals, the confrontation, the visit from Adult Protective Services. Every detail. Slowly, clearly, without emotion clouding the facts. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned back slightly. "And you're certain you did not sign this authorization?" she asked, holding up the document. "I'm certain." She nodded. "Our preliminary analysis agrees with you." That should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. It felt like confirmation. Like something that had already been decided long before this moment. "We've also traced the financial transfers," she continued. "To Ashley Collins?" "Yes," I said quietly. "And your son, Michael Thornton, had authorized access to your account." "We've also traced the financial transfers," she continued. "To Ashley Collins?" "Yes," I said quietly. "And your son, Michael Thornton, had authorized access to your account?" "Yes." She closed the folder for a moment. "Do you believe your son was aware of these transactions?" I paused, because this was the question, the one that mattered. "I believe," I said slowly, "that he allowed access without understanding the full extent of what was happening." She studied me carefully. "And now I said, I believe he understands." Another note, another quiet moment of consideration. "We will need to speak with both of them," she said. "I understand. And Ms. Thornton," she added, her tone softening slightly, "this may move into formal charges depending on what we confirm." Charges. The word echoed in the room. Heavy. Final. I nodded. I expected that. After they left, I sat alone for a long time. Not thinking, not planning, just sitting. Because everything had crossed a line now. There was no going back to conversations. No more explanations. No more, "We'll fix this." Only consequences. That evening, Michael called. I let it ring longer this time. Not out of hesitation, out of understanding. Because I knew what this call meant. "Mom," his voice said when I answered. "They came to see me," he said immediately. "The police?" "Yes," I replied. There was a pause. Long, heavy. "She's saying it's a misunderstanding," he said. "Of course she is. She says the money was going to be used for managing things long term, for investments, for planning." I closed my eyes. Even now. Even now, she was reframing it, rewriting it. "She didn't have permission," I said. "I know," he said quietly. That was new. No hesitation, no defense, just acceptance. "They asked me if I knew," he continued. "And what did you say I told them the truth?" I waited. "I told them I didn't know she was transferring money," he said, "that I trusted her to help organize things." I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. "And?" I asked, and they didn't look convinced. He admitted. Because they wouldn't. Because trust wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I should have stopped it," he said again. "Yes." "I should have seen it." "Yes." His voice cracked slightly. I don't know how this got so far. I did, but I didn't say it, because he was starting to understand on his own. She's scared, he added quietly. I sat up a little straighter. Good, I said. He hesitated. You don't feel anything for her? He asked. I thought about that. Really thought about it. Because the answer mattered. I feel clarity, I said. That's not what I asked. No, I replied, but it's what I have. Silence. Then, she might get charged, he said. Yes, and if she does, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. It won't be because of me, I said. It will be because of what she did. Another long pause. I don't know how to fix this, he said again. You don't, I repeated. You face it. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Slower now. Heavier. Like someone finally understanding the weight of something they can't undo. I'm sorry, he said. The words were quiet, fragile, but real. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I recognized something important. This wasn't the apology of someone trying to escape consequences. This was the apology of someone who finally saw them. I know, I said, and for the first time, that was enough. The court date was set 2 weeks later. 2 weeks. That was all it took for everything to move from quiet conversations and private realizations into something public, undeniable, and permanent. I didn't tell many people. There was no reason to. This wasn't about proving something to the world. It was about standing in the truth even when it became uncomfortable. Especially then. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before the alarm. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that usually felt comforting, but today it carried something heavier. Finality. I moved slowly, deliberately as I got dressed. A simple navy blouse, gray slacks, nothing dramatic, nothing that asked for attention, because I didn't need to look strong. I already was. Before leaving, I walked into the kitchen and looked at the table. The plastic bag was still there, in the exact same place, unchanged, ordinary. I picked it up and held it for a moment, feeling the soft crinkle of the plastic in my hands. So many times I had been embarrassed by things like this, by simplicity, by not having what others considered proper. And yet this bag had carried more truth than anything else in my life. I tied the knot again, firm, secure, and walked out the door. The courthouse stood tall and impersonal, its wide steps leading up to doors that had seen thousands of stories pass through them. Some loud, some quiet, all important. Michael was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. He looked older, not physically, but in the way he held himself, like something inside him had shifted and hadn't settled yet. Mom, he said when he saw me. I nodded. Michael. He glanced at the bag in my hand. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Recognition, regret. Maybe both. She's inside, he said. Of course she was. We walked in together, but not side by side. There was space between us now. Not distance. Space. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quiet. Orderly. A few people sat scattered in the benches, strangers mostly. A couple of officials, a clerk, a man reviewing papers near the front. And Ashley. She sat at the defense table, her posture straight, her expression composed. But it wasn't the same composure I had seen before. This wasn't control. This was effort. The kind of effort it takes to hold something together when it's already starting to fall apart. She looked up as we entered. Our eyes met. And for the first time since all of this began, she didn't look confident. She looked uncertain. The hearing began without ceremony. Names were called. Statements were made. Everything moved in a rhythm that felt both structured and distant. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly. The plastic bag in my hand. I could feel eyes on it, curious, judging, confused. I walked to the front and placed it gently on the table, the same way I had done before. At home, with the bank, with Adult Protective Services. Each time, it had shifted something. Each time, it had changed the direction of the truth. "Ms. Thornton," the judge said, "you may proceed." I took a breath. Steady. Clear. "I would like to present evidence regarding unauthorized transactions on my personal bank account," I said. My voice didn't shake, not even slightly. I untied the knot, reached inside, and began laying out the papers, one by one. The bank statements, the transaction history, the authorization form, the notice. Each piece placed carefully, deliberately. I explained everything, not emotionally, not dramatically, just the facts. What I saw, what I didn't authorize, what was confirmed, what was traced. Ashley's lawyer tried to interrupt once. "Objection." But the judge raised a hand. "Let her finish." So I did. When I was done, the room was quiet. Not tense, not chaotic, just quiet. Because the truth has a way of settling into a room like that. Ashley was called next. She stood smoothing her blouse slightly, her composure returning, but thinner now. More fragile. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "Of course. It was never my intention to harm Ms. Thornton," she continued. "The funds were being managed with long-term financial planning in mind." "Without my consent," I said calmly. She glanced at me briefly, then back at the judge. "The authorization was forged," I said. This time, there was no objection. No interruption. Because the word didn't need defending. It was already supported, already proven. Ashley's voice faltered for just a moment. Just enough. "I believed I had implied permission," she said. Implied. The word felt hollow, empty. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Permission is not implied in financial authorization," he said. That was the moment. The shift. Small, precise, irreversible. Ashley's shoulders lowered slightly. Just a fraction. But I saw it. The realization. The understanding. This wasn't something she could talk her way out of. This wasn't something she could reframe. It wasn't something she could reframe. The S was something she had to face. Michael was called after that. He stood slowly, his movements careful, measured, and when he spoke, he didn't defend her. I trusted hers was something she had to face. Michael was called after that. He stood slowly, his movements careful, measured, and when he spoke, he didn't defend her. I trusted her, he said, but I should have verified what was happening. The honesty in his voice changed the room, not dramatically, but noticeably. Because real truth, does that. It shifts things, quietly, powerfully. The hearing didn't last long after that. It didn't need to. The evidence had already spoken. The truth had already settled. As we stepped out of the courtroom, the air felt different, lighter, clearer. Ashley walked out separately, her lawyer speaking quietly beside her. She didn't look at me this time, Not once. Michael stood beside me for a moment, neither of us speaking. Then, "You were right," he said. I looked at him. "I know," I replied, not with pride, not with bitterness, just acceptance, because being right didn't feel like victory. It felt like resolution. And as I stood there, the plastic bag still in my hand, I realized something that stayed with me long after that day ended. They had laughed at it, dismissed it, looked down on it. But in the end, it was the one thing that carried the truth all the way to the light. The decision came down a week later, not in a dramatic courtroom scene, not with raised voices or sudden revelations, but in a quiet, structured room where everything had already been laid out, examined, and understood. I wasn't there when Ashley received the official ruling, but I heard about it. From Michael. He called that evening. His voice sounded different again. Not panicked, not defensive, just tired. "It's done," he said. I was sitting in the same chair I had occupied for weeks now, the plastic bag resting beside me on the table. "What happened?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, "She's being charged," he said. The words landed gently, not like a blow, not like a victory, just truth. "And?" I asked. "Financial fraud," he continued. "Forgery, unauthorized access." I closed my eyes briefly, not out of relief, but out of recognition. This was the outcome we had both known was coming. "She says she didn't think it would go this far," he added quietly. I almost responded, almost said something about consequences, about choices. But I didn't, because none of that mattered anymore. It had already gone as far as it needed to. "What about you?" I asked instead. He exhaled slowly. "They're not charging me," he said, "but I'm still being reviewed. They said I should have known, that I had a responsibility." "Yes," I said. "I know," he replied. And for the first time, there was no resistance in his voice, just acceptance. "I've been thinking a lot," he continued, "about everything." I didn't interrupt, because I could hear it. This wasn't an excuse. This was reflection. "I kept telling myself I was helping," he said, "that I was doing the responsible thing, that I was stepping in when you needed it." His voice faltered slightly. "But I never stopped to ask if you actually needed it." I looked down at my hands. "At some point," he continued, "it stopped being about you and started being about control, about making things easier for us." There it was, finally said out loud, not softened, not redirected. The truth. "I'm sorry," he said again. This time, it sounded different, not just regret. Understanding. "I know," I said, quietly. We sat in silence for a moment. Even through the phone, I could feel it. The distance between us had changed. Not gone, but different. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I looked around the house, at the walls, the furniture, the quiet history that still lived in every corner. "I'm staying," I said. He let out a small breath. "I thought you might." "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I looked around the house, at the walls, the furniture, the quiet history that still lived in every corner. "I'm staying," I said. He let out a small breath. "I thought you might." "I built my life here," I continued. "I'm not leaving it because someone else decided I should." "No," he said. "You shouldn't." Another pause. Then I don't expect things to go back to normal, he added. They won't, I said. I know. But that doesn't mean they can't move forward, I continued. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think we can, he asked. I thought about that, really thought about it, because the answer mattered. Not just for him, for me. Forward doesn't mean forgetting, I said slowly. I understand. It means being honest about what happened and choosing what comes next carefully. I can do that, he said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I hope so. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, not replaying the past, not questioning the outcome, just sitting in the stillness of what remained, because something had changed, not just in Michael, in me. For weeks I had been reacting, responding, defending, holding on. Now I was deciding. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the familiar street. The same trees, the same quiet sidewalks, the same life that had always been there, unchanged. And yet everything felt different. Not because something had been taken, but because something had been returned. My sense of control, my clarity, my voice. I walked back to the table and picked up the plastic bag again. The same one they had laughed at, the same one they had dismissed. I untied it and looked at the papers inside. Not as evidence, not anymore, but as a reminder of what I had faced, of what I had protected, of what I had refused to lose. I folded them carefully and placed them back inside. Then I tied the knot again. Not tightly this time, just enough, because I didn't need to hold on as tightly anymore. The truth had already done its work, and as I set the bag back down on the table, I realized something that stayed with me long after everything had settled. Strength doesn't always look like resistance. Sometimes it looks like quiet persistence, like paying attention when something feels wrong, like standing your ground when everyone else thinks you should step aside, like holding on to something simple until it becomes undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace in my own home again. Not because nothing had changed, but because I had. It didn't end with the court. That's something people don't always understand. They think justice is a moment, a verdict, a decision. But it isn't. Justice is what comes after. It's what you choose to do when the noise fades, when the room empties, when the consequences settle into everyday life. A month passed. Then another. The house found its rhythm again. Not the same rhythm as before. Not the quiet, unquestioned peace I used to mistake for safety. This was different. This was earned. I started small, reorganizing the study, going through every document, every folder, every drawer, slowly, deliberately. Not because I was afraid something else was missing, but because I needed to rebuild something. Trust, not in others, in myself. Each paper I touched, each decision I made reminded me of something I had nearly lost. Not my home, not my money, my confidence in my own judgment. And that mattered more than anything else. Michael came by one afternoon, alone. He didn't knock right away. I saw him through the window, standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, just waiting, like he used to when he was a teenager, unsure if he was in trouble or not. I opened the door. "Hi," he said. "Hi." There was no tension this time, No sharp edges, just caution. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Yes." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where everything had unfolded, where truth had been laid out, where control had shifted, where something had broken, and something else had begun. "I've been going to counseling," he said after a moment. That surprised me, not because I didn't think he needed it, but because he chose it. "That's good," I said. He nodded. "I needed to understand how I let things go that far," he added. I didn't respond immediately, because I knew that wasn't something you figured out in a single session, or even a few. "That takes time," I said. "I know," he replied. He looked around the kitchen, his eyes lingering on small details, the counter, the cabinets, the window. "I used to think this place was outdated," he said quietly. I almost smiled. "You weren't the only one." He nodded. "But now," he continued, "I see it differently." "How?" I asked. He looked at me. "Like it's yours," he said. The simplicity of that answer stayed with me, because that was what this had all been about. Ownership, not just of property, of life, of choices, of identity. I should have seen that before he added. "Yes," I said, but there was no anger in it, just acknowledgement. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just real. "I'm not asking for things to go back to the way they were," he said. "They won't. I know. But I want to be part of your life." He continued. "The right way this time." I studied him for a long moment, because this was the moment that mattered. Not the court, not the investigation. This, the quiet human part of what comes after. "That depends on what you do next," I said. He nodded. "I understand." And for the first time, I believed that he did. Ethan came by a week later, alone. He stood in the doorway shifting slightly. Why? Unsure. "Hi, Grandma," he said. "Hi, sweetheart." He stepped inside, his eyes moving around the house, taking it in, processing it. "They told me what happened," he said. I nodded. I thought something felty unsure. "Hi, Grandma," he said. "Hi, sweetheart." He stepped inside, his eyes moving around the house, taking it in, processing it. "They told me what happened," he said. I nodded. I thought something felt weird, he added. "They didn't act normal." I smiled softly. "You noticed more than they thought." He shrugged. "I just didn't understand it." "That's okay," I said. "You do now." He thought for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Kind of." I walked over to the table and picked up the plastic bag. He looked at it curiously. "That's the bag?" he asked. "Yes." He frowned slightly. "That's it?" I nodded. "That's it." He stepped closer. I untied it and showed him the papers inside. "This," I said, "is what matters. Not the bag, not how it looks, what it carries." He nodded slowly. "So they were wrong," he said. "Yes, and you proved it." I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "The truth proved it." He smiled a little. "I like that better." So did I. After he left, I sat down at the table again, the bag in front of me, the house quiet, the light soft through the window. And I realized something I hadn't fully put into words before. This wasn't just a story about betrayal, or money, or control. It was a story about attention. About listening to that quiet voice inside you that says something isn't right. About not letting other people redefine your reality. Other people redefine your reality just because they speak louder. About holding on to something simple until it becomes undeniable. I picked up the bag one last time, then walked to the study, opened a drawer, and placed it inside. Not hidden, not forgotten. Just because they speak louder. About holding on to something simple until it becomes undeniable. I picked up the bag one last time, then walked to the study, opened a drawer, and placed it inside. Not hidden, not forgotten, just kept, because I didn't need to carry it anymore. I had already carried it far enough. And as I closed the drawer, I felt something settle inside me. Not relief, not victory, something deeper, peace, the kind that doesn't come from things staying the same, but from knowing you can face it when they don't. This story isn't really about a plastic bag. It's about what we carry inside it, the quiet truths we protect, the instincts we ignore until we can't anymore, and the moment we decide to trust ourselves again. Sometimes the people closest to us don't just misunderstand us. They underestimate us. They think age means weakness, that silence means confusion, that kindness means surrender. But strength doesn't always look loud. It doesn't always fight back immediately. Sometimes it watches, it learns, it waits, and when the time comes, it stands, not with anger, but with clarity. If you've ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or doubted, especially by people who should have known you better, this story is for you. I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever trusted your instincts even when others told you not to? What would you have done in my place? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are so many more stories like this. Stories about truth, resilience, and finding your voice again. Where are you watching from today, and what time is it where you are? Sometimes just knowing someone out there understands makes all the difference. Si 20 000.